Is there a God? Well, let me just skip that one, we'll come back to it. There's only one life and there's no resurrection. How much time do we have? Okay, good. There's only one life, there's no resurrection. Using analogies only, how can you explain this? That there's got to be more than one life. Let me share it with you. Tfaddal, go ahead. Excellent. So this injustice is a big question here. How will the injustices in the world be balanced out, is what the brother said. Excellent. You know, let me explain this from a number of different ways, yeah? I remember one... Naam, Tfaddal, Abdullah. Okay, so how can you see Allah's mercy if you don't... What did you say? Okay, if there isn't some punishment, if there isn't some bad, how will you realize the value of the good? And this is true. We all know that, right? Those of you who grew up in the States and then you went overseas, you come to value a lot of things that you have here. You know that they're so good when you see so bad. Yeah? Complain about things here, complain about roads, complain about that. Then go overseas, look at the roads and come back like, kiss the tarmac. This is great. So you see the bad, you can appreciate the good, right? You know, one time there was a reporter on public radio, NPR. She started to become an atheist and she started to document her thoughts for her show. She said, the first day a voice said to me, there is no God. She said the second day it became louder. The third day it became louder, there is no God. And I became convinced that there is no God. She said after about a week of being an atheist, this is to quote her own words, she said, suddenly it hit me. So Hitler just died? She kept repeating it. Hitler just died? And it didn't make sense to her. That if there is no God, someone can be responsible for the death of so many people, and that's all that happened to him, is that he died. He's not going to be punished, he's not going to pay for it, he just died. You know, recently in Toronto, an atheist was telling me, he's saying, yeah, there should be a reward, there should not be any reward, no punishment, so what? I told him, so Hitler, do you think it's fair that nothing happens to Hitler? And he just started staring at me, and he just said, yeah. I said, you wouldn't do anything to Hitler? He's like, no. And you can tell he's lying, right? Yeah. So his first is like, So, sometimes people just want to win the argument, right? And he knows his hesitation, his discomfort. He knew he didn't really believe that. So this woman, she just kept saying, Hitler just died, and that's all that happens to him? So she's actually drawing on a concept that's in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ مَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ. Very strong verses. Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, do we equate like the evildoers, the transgressors, yeah? Like the criminals, do we equate them to the believers? Then Allah says something, مَا لَكُمْ, what's wrong with you? How do you judge? How do you judge? So if someone is doing good their entire life, then they die and they're buried and there is no life after death. And someone is doing bad their entire life, murdering and stealing, and they die, they're buried and there's no life after death. Did they go to the same place? They went to the same place. There's no reward, there's no punishment, and that's not fair. So if someone tells you, there is a God, but we're not resurrected. We live once, we're not resurrected, then especially if they say there is a God, you can follow the following technique. You can ask them, number one, to describe God. You said there is a God, but He's not going to resurrect us. He just gave us this one life. So what is this God? What's His description? No doubt they're going to use words in the positive sense about God. They're going to say He's wise, He's intelligent, He's powerful, He's fair, He's just. So now this fair and just God, you're telling me He's all knowledgeable and intelligent, and He doesn't know the concept of reward. He doesn't understand the concept of retribution. And the analogy we always use, it's an old one, but it's like the child that falls down and hits its head on the table. The child will keep crying until the mother says, bad table. Bad table, bad table, hits the table. The child stops crying. True, sisters? The child stops crying because even this 2-year-old who still cannot speak understands the concept of reward and punishment, understands retribution. And the child knows that now the table got hit the same way it hit me. The child stops crying. How can a child who doesn't speak know this concept, and you're telling me God doesn't know this concept? So that's the analogy. We tell them that if there is a God, then there absolutely must be a resurrection, because there has to be reward and punishment. Yeah? People get away with it. Someone murders you, takes you away from your children, you don't get to see them live or graduate or get married, or you don't get to see your grandchildren. He did a lot of injustice to you. Nothing happens to him. And you don't get anything back and nothing. It's just not fair. And another analogy, if you don't like the bad table one, animals, they understand retribution, right? The monkey at your local zoo. When you offend the monkey, he flings things at you, right? If you want to know what, just go to the zoo, offend the monkey, but just take an umbrella and extra clothing, and you'll see what he'll do. He understands getting back at people, yeah? And other animals do that. Camels get back at you, right? If you mistreat a camel, he'll get a chance, he'll just grind you into the ground, he'll crush you, right? I used to always talk about another example of the bird called the honey guide. Anyone heard of that? Anyone heard this example? This bird in Africa that when it finds a beehive, it comes to you, looks you in the eye, starts to sing, and it starts to flutter its wings, and it guides you to the honey. And so the idea is, humans, they have means and ways to remove the honey, smoke and all that. And then after they eat from the honey, they have to leave some for the bird. That's the whole deal. You can watch it, by the way, on YouTube. Just search honey guide, and you'll see videos of it calling people, or calling even badgers, because they have thick fur and protects them from the bee stings. And it'll just go from branch to branch, guiding people to the honey. Now they say that this bird, if you don't leave it any honey, it tells you don't worry about it. I know another place where there's honey. And it keeps calling you again and again, and it takes you to the territory of a vicious animal that will attack you. It's a bird. It understands getting even. It understands retribution. You telling me God doesn't understand it? So these are just some analogies you can use to explain that there is life after death. There is a resurrection. If you say there is a God, then there absolutely has to be a resurrection. Otherwise, this is an unfair God. All right, D.